She gave up everything, her savings, her shop, and the only steady life she'd ever known for a rust-covered warehouse on the edge of nowhere. Everyone told her she was throwing her future away. But when she stepped inside that dusty, forgotten space and pulled back the tarp on a single covered shape, what she found changed not only her life, but the story of her entire town. What started as desperation became destiny. Before we dive in, let us know where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from every corner of the world. And if stories of grit, mystery, and redemption light a fire in you, hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow's story, it's even more unbelievable than this one. Let's begin. Claire Jensen hadn't planned to be standing in front of a rusted, corrugated metal warehouse at golden hour, boots scuffing the cracked concrete, wondering if she'd just thrown her entire future away. But then again, not much about her life lately had gone to plan. The shop she'd poured 7 years into gone. The landlord had tripled the rent, citing redevelopment, and her appeals fell on deaf ears. She'd sold half her tools, her truck, and even the old neon sign that once hung above Jensen Auto and Diesel, just to scrape together enough for this gamble. The warehouse sat on the edge of town like a secret no one wanted to talk about. Half swallowed by tall grass and stories, its walls weathered with time and its windows long blind. Claire stood with her arms crossed, fingers digging into the sleeves of her denim shirt. The silence out here was different, not peaceful, but waiting. She hadn't even told anyone she'd bought it. Not her cousin Mason, not Father Kent, not even her old mentor, Red. Maybe she was afraid they'd try to stop her. Or worse, pity her. The agent who handled the sale never even stepped out of his car. Just tossed her the keys and peeled off with a nod, like he was happy to be done with it. As is, he'd said. No questions. That had been 2 hours ago, and still, Claire hadn't moved. But something about the place called to her. Not in a mystical, fate-wrapped kind of way, more like a whisper in her bones. The kind that says, you don't know why this matters yet, but it does. So she walked. Boots crunching gravel, the tin door creaking as she pulled it open. Sunlight flooded the first few feet of the space, then died into shadow. Dust swirled like ghosts in the air, catching the fading light. Old workbenches lined the far wall, half-eaten by time. A few oil drums stood like forgotten sentinels. And in the center of the vast empty space, covered in a heavy canvas tarp, was something. Boxy, wide, sitting on 4 wheels with its front slightly raised, like it had once driven in proud but now slept deeply. Claire blinked. Her heart began to thump. It wasn't a car. Not exactly. The shape was bulkier, taller, military. She walked closer. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the tarp stiff, frayed, and she froze. Not from fear, but from the strange certainty that the moment she pulled it back, nothing in her life would be the same again. She hadn't come here looking for a mystery. She'd come to survive. To start over. But now, standing in that cold, dust-choked light, Claire understood something she hadn't before. This warehouse wasn't just hiding rust and junk. It was hiding a story, and somehow, that story had waited for her. The tarp was heavier than it looked. Claire gripped the edge and gave it a tug, coughing as a thick cloud of dust rose around her like smoke from a long-dead fire. It resisted her at first, years of stillness clinging to the fabric, but with one firm pull, it slid off in a single breathless motion. The shape beneath revealed itself slowly, as if waking up after years in the dark. Her breath caught. It was a truck, but not any kind she'd seen in person before. Military grade, olive drab, with dull, flaking paint and steel paneling pocked with age. The body was a beast, square-jawed and solid, like it had been built to outlast the world. One tire was completely flat, the others sagged but intact. On the rear quarter panel, faded under grime and weather, were barely visible letters. USA followed by a string of numbers. But what sent a shiver up Claire's spine wasn't the truck itself. It was the back. Instead of a standard cargo bed, It had a reinforced, boxy structure like a secure delivery unit or mobile command center. The windows were blacked out, the seams sealed. She circled it slowly, boots echoing across the warehouse floor. A padlock hung from a thick hasp on the rear doors. Heavy. Military issue. Still locked. Still strong. Claire stood there a long time, hands on her hips, heart pounding not from fear, but from a rising sense of, what is this? There were no markings to identify a unit, no signs of where it had been. Just a ghost of a vehicle, abandoned and left behind like someone meant for it to disappear. She opened the driver's side door with effort, the hinge moaning in protest, and was hit with the smell of dry rubber, rust, and time. The seat was intact but torn, the dashboard dusty, but mostly untouched. Her fingers grazed the cracked steering wheel. The key was still in the ignition. That shouldn't have been possible. Inside the glove box, she found a sealed envelope, yellowed and brittle. Her name wasn't on it. In fact, there was no address at all. Just one word, written in heavy, blocky black ink. Classified. Claire stared at it, torn between logic and something deeper instinct, maybe. A mechanic by trade, she wasn't one to romanticize junk. But this didn't feel like junk. It felt deliberate. She slid the envelope into her jacket pocket and stepped back from the truck, scanning the space again. The warehouse wasn't massive, but it was long. Shadows stretched deep into the corners, hiding piles of equipment and crates wrapped in dry plastic. This place hadn't just been storage, it had been used, maintained, then abruptly forgotten. Claire felt the weight of it, of everything. The truck, the lock, the envelope, the silence. She wasn't just standing in a building, she had stepped into a secret. Claire returned the next morning, before the sun had finished rising. She hadn't slept much. Her mind spun in loops around the truck, the envelope, and the still locked rear doors. Part of her told her to call someone a historian, the police, anyone. But the other part, the part that had lived her whole life, elbow deep in machines no one else cared to touch, whispered something different. You were meant to find this. With the tarp now fully removed and folded into a dusty heap in the corner, the vehicle sat in plain sight, a sleeping relic. She stood in front of it, arms folded across her chest, as the early light filtered through the cracked windows of the warehouse. The moment felt like holding your breath right before turning the key in a car that hasn't run in decades. She opened the driver's door again. The hinges groaned less this time, as if acknowledging her return. Claire slid into the seat, hands moving across the wheel, the dash, the strange arrangement of controls. It was unlike any commercial truck she'd ever worked on. No manufacturer's stamp, no VIN plate. Even the serial numbers looked intentionally scrubbed. She opened the glove compartment once more and took out the envelope. It was thicker than she'd remembered. The paper crackled under her fingers. She peeled the flap open and removed two things: a folded black and white photograph and a single page typed in courier font, labeled, "Internal use only, eyes only, Operation Moth." Her breath hitched. Operation Moth? The photo showed a younger version of the truck, pristine and shining, parked in front of what looked like a secure base. 4 figures stood in front of it, all in uniform, and one of them, she squinted. Her heart gave a sudden, sharp twist. The man on the far left looked like her father. She didn't want to believe it, couldn't. He had served in the military, sure, but he'd never talked about secret projects. He'd passed away 5 years ago, taking most of his stories with him. Her mother had always dismissed his war days as things better left in the past. But this was a connection, a thread. The typed page mentioned a few details, fragmented and vague. Mobile Experimental Transport Unit Number 7. Deployment approved. The 14th of June, 1986. Cargo vault, equipped with biometric seal. Mission status: incomplete. Final transfer location: Redwind Storage Compound, Glenridge, GA. That was this town. This warehouse. Claire stood abruptly, paper still in hand, heart hammering. She circled the vehicle again, this time with new eyes. This wasn't just surplus. It had been placed here, intentionally. And if that really was her father in the photo, then she wasn't just uncovering history. She was uncovering his history. She pressed her palm gently to the cold steel of the truck's rear door and whispered, "What were you part of?" The silence didn't answer, but the warehouse seemed to breathe a little deeper. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the photo. Every time she looked at it, the resemblance to her father carved deeper into her chest. The way he stood, weight slightly to the right, hands clasped behind his back, was unmistakable. She'd seen that same stance 100 times growing up, whenever he worked on engines or waited for her to hand him a wrench. Now, the photo felt like a time capsule she wasn't meant to open. But it was too late. The door was open, and the ghosts had already stepped through. By late morning, she'd cleared a workspace around the truck. Dust sheets folded, boxes stacked, floor swept. She set her tools in neat rows across an old metal table, not because she planned to fix anything yet, but because that's how her mind worked. Order before understanding. The warehouse creaked as the day warmed, the air thick with the scent of rust and oil. The only light came from the open door, where sunlight spilled across the truck's hood in gold stripes. She slid into the cab again, notebook in hand. She wanted to document everything: the strange markings, the missing cereals, the sealed cargo unit. But when she leaned across to inspect the glove compartment again, something new caught her attention. Just below the dash, near the floorboard, a small metal slot. It was narrow, too small for tools, too deliberate to be random. Claire knelt down and pried at it with a flathead screwdriver. The panel resisted at first, then clicked. Inside was a hidden compartment, shallow, rectangular, lined with felt. A letterbox, as her dad used to call secret compartments in classic cars. Her pulse quickened. Inside lay another envelope. This one newer, no dust, no decay, just a clean white seal with a faint watermark of an eagle. No markings, no name. She hesitated only a moment before opening it. Inside were 2 items, a brass key and a folded note on thin paper. The handwriting was neat, steady, and heartbreakingly familiar. "Claire, if you're reading this, then you've already found what I couldn't finish. Some things were never supposed to be buried, but I did what I had to do to protect you. Look beneath the floor." "Dad." Her breath caught so hard it hurt. She read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't make sense, and yet they made too much sense. Her father had always been a quiet man, haunted by something she couldn't name. Late nights, secret phone calls, long drives with no explanation. She thought they were just symptoms of grief after her mother's passing. But maybe it was something else entirely. Claire's hands trembled as she held the key to the light. The tag etched into the top read simply, S1. She looked toward the rear of the warehouse, the cracked concrete floor, the old oil stains, the warped boards near the center. "Beneath the floor," she whispered. And for the first time in years, she felt her father close again, not as a memory, but as a message. The floor beneath the truck didn't look like much. Just cracked concrete, scuffed by time and tire tread. But now Claire saw it differently, with the kind of focus only grief and curiosity could forge. She paced the perimeter slowly, tapping with the heel of her boot, listening for hollow tones among the solid. Near the center of the warehouse, one particular stretch responded with a dull, empty thunk. That was it. That was the place her father had hidden something beneath, something that had been buried in silence, waiting. She knelt down, brushed away the dust and dirt. There were hairline seams in the concrete she hadn't noticed before, almost like the outline of a square panel. At the corner was a rusted ring handle flush with the floor. She tugged once, twice, and on the third pull, it groaned upward an inch. Claire leaned all her weight into it, teeth gritted, and finally lifted the hatch fully open. Beneath was a ladder steel, corroded but sturdy, descending into pitch blackness. She stared for a long moment. Her breath was shallow, heart loud in her ears. This wasn't a storage basement or a storm shelter. It was something else. Something her father had gone to lengths to hide. She grabbed a flashlight, clipped it to her belt, and began the slow climb down, boots echoing softly as she dropped beneath the earth. The air below was colder than expected, sharp with the smell of metal and age. At the bottom, the flashlight beam caught the shape of a narrow hallway, carved from concrete and lined with industrial piping. It felt like part of a bunker, not a warehouse. Claire's breath turned to fog. She moved forward carefully, light flicking across locked doors and dust-covered crates stacked in corners. None of this made sense. This kind of construction would have required permits, blueprints, labor, yet no one in town had ever mentioned anything like this. She stopped in front of a metal door marked Section 7. The brass key in her pocket matched the lock. Claire hesitated, then slid the key in, turned it, and heard a satisfying click. The door opened slowly, heavy on its hinges. Inside was a single room, low ceiling. Shelves of aging tech reels of magnetic tape, surveillance gear from the Cold War era, maps with red ink scribbled in sharp slashes across continents. And in the center of the room, under a plastic dust cover, was a wooden table. On it sat a single-framed photo, her father younger in uniform shaking hands with a man Claire didn't recognize. She stepped closer. The label beneath read, Operation Moth. Joint Command, 1987. Her father hadn't just worked in the military. He'd been part of something secret, something forgotten, or worse, something erased. Claire backed away slowly, chest tight. She needed answers, and there was only one person left in Glenridge who might have them. Red Walker, her father's old army buddy. Red Walker didn't answer his phone the first time Claire called, or the second. It wasn't until she texted a photo of the framed Operation Moth picture that his number lit up her screen with a simple reply. Come now, bring that photo, and don't tell anyone else. She found him where he always was, out at the old firehouse he'd converted into a metal shop after retiring from the army. The place smelled of diesel, pine cleaner, and too many secrets. Red was in his 60s now, thick-shouldered and slow-moving, with a jaw that had seen more war than conversation. When Claire stepped inside, he didn't look up from his grinder, just held out a calloused hand, palm open. She placed the photo in it without a word. He turned off the tool and stared. His face didn't move, but Claire saw it a twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way his fingers tensed around the frame like it might disappear. Where'd you get this? He asked. In a hidden room, she said. Under a warehouse my father apparently used to hide. I don't even know what yet. Red exhaled through his nose. Set the photo down like it was made of glass. Damn fool, he muttered. I told him to burn everything. Every map, every file, all of it. Claire stepped closer. You knew? I didn't just know. I was there, and just like that, the dam broke. Red led her to the back of the shop, past rusted motorcycles and old radios, to a room locked behind a keypad. Inside, rows of file cabinets, each one labeled in red marker. He pulled one open, flipped through folders, and removed a weathered envelope marked Moth, Personal. Inside were copies of the same map Claire had seen in the vault, but these had dates, coordinates, notations. What was it? She asked. Operation Moth, he said slowly, was a mobile observation program, Cold War era, meant to track anomalous electromagnetic events, supposedly natural, but they weren't, at least, not always. Claire blinked. Electromagnetic events? Like power surges? Like things disappearing, planes, signals, whole units sometimes. That truck you found? It was part of a mobile base, self-contained surveillance. We used it to tail a Russian contact who went dark on U.S. soil, but the last night, something happened. He paused. What happened, Red? He looked her in the eye. Your father disappeared. For almost 3 days. And when he came back, he wouldn't speak. Not a word. Just handed me that key, the same one you found, and said, If anything ever happens to me, it's hers. Claire felt her knees go weak. She sat on an overturned bucket, heart hammering. Red pulled out one last item, a small metal case. I was told never to open this. Maybe it's time. He clicked it open. Inside was a black flash drive. No label. Just one file. Moth. Final. EXE. Claire stared at the flash drive like it was ticking. The tiny device sat there in its velvet-lined case, quiet, cold, and impossibly heavy. The file name alone, Moth. Final. X buzzed in her head like static. This wasn't just some old government report or tactical archive. This was personal. This had her father's silence wrapped inside it. Red handed her the drive, his fingers lingering longer than necessary. I don't know what's on it, he said quietly. And I'm not sure I want to. Claire nodded, then slipped it into her pocket like a relic. I do. Back at the warehouse, she cleared off the old workbench, set up her battered laptop, and powered it on. The fans groaned like an old man stretching after a long sleep. She didn't bother with Wi-Fi. Whatever was on this drive, she didn't want it connected to anything outside these four walls. She inserted it slowly, holding her breath as the system detected the device. A single folder appeared. Inside, one executable file. Moth. Final. X. She clicked. The screen went black for a moment. Then a command prompt style interface loaded. No design, no logo, just white text on black. Moth protocol. Active. Voice ident required. Enter code. Claire froze. She didn't have a code. She didn't even know what it meant by voice ident. But then she remembered the black box she'd seen back in the hidden room beneath the warehouse, surrounded by surveillance reels and Cold War files. She hadn't touched it. Not yet. She left the laptop running and made her way down the hatch again, flashlight in hand, breath clouding as she descended. The black box still sat there on the steel table mat, sealed, but humming faintly now, as if responding to her presence. It had no buttons, no screen, just a single microphone-like port on the front and a tiny engraved label above it. When ready, say his name. Claire stared. Her chest tightened. She stepped closer and whispered, James Jensen. Hum? Silence. Then click. The black box opened with a hiss. Inside was a small recorder with a labeled cassette. Ob Moth. Command entry. She took it back upstairs, slid it into a digital converter she used for old engine diagnostics, and fed the signal into her laptop. The screen blinked. Voice ID verified. Commander Jensen. Archive. Unlocked. Playback. Initiated. A distorted voice crackled through the speakers, her father's. If you're hearing this, something went wrong. Moth wasn't just surveillance. It was a gate. We didn't know that at first. We thought we were tracking power signatures, but we were documenting openings, folds, the kind you don't come back from unless you're meant to. I came back. I don't know how, but I saw what was on the other side. And I couldn't let them use it. Claire's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a secret project. It was a door, and her father had walked through it. And now, it was open again. The recording continued, her father's voice frayed by time and static, but unwavering. If anyone finds this, if Claire finds this, don't try to finish what we started. Moth was never meant to be reopened. They thought they could control it. They couldn't. What's behind that gate? It listens. Claire sat frozen in the dim warehouse, the glow of the laptop casting shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should. Her father's voice faded, replaced by a dull hiss. Then silence. The screen blinked once more. Secondary archive-ready video logs. Restricted. Enter clearance code. Red 7. Her heart skipped. She remembered that phrase, Red 7. It had been her dad's CB handle when she was a kid, long before she ever knew what it meant. She typed it in, fingers trembling. The screen blinked again. Then came footage. Grainy, time-stamped, black, and white. The first showed the military truck, the very one parked in the warehouse, being loaded with cables, generators, and sealed crates. A group of soldiers stood nearby, one of them clearly her father. Another clip. The vehicle parked in a dense pine forest, surrounded by tripods and strange antennae pulsing with faint light. The footage jumped. A third clip, darker, filmed inside the truck. Her father sat beside the black box now open on her workbench. His face was pale, sweating. His eyes stared at something off-screen. "The gate activated for 13 seconds, he said on the tape. "We recorded pulses. Not light, not sound. Like thought patterns, but foreign, not human." Claire paused the video, her mind racing. What kind of project had this been? Her father, always quiet, practical, the man who taught her to rebuild transmissions before she learned to drive, had stood in front of something beyond explanation. And he hadn't just walked away. He'd buried it. Hidden it all, the truck, the recordings, the vault, like a bomb no one else should ever touch. She played the final clip. It was shorter. No sound. Just a still shot of a cave or tunnel. Darkness pressing in at the edges. In the middle, a faint shimmer, not quite visible, but clearly present. The shape flickered, shifted, as if the camera struggled to keep hold of it. Then, just before the screen cut to black, Claire saw it. A silhouette, human-sized, standing inside the shimmer. Watching, the screen went dark. Claire slammed the laptop shut, heart racing. The silence in the warehouse now felt heavier, almost aware. She backed away from the table, every hair on her body standing on end. She needed air. She needed time to think. But the world outside this warehouse was already different. She had opened the box. And now, she couldn't pretend she hadn't seen what was inside. The files didn't just confirm her father's involvement. They confirmed something else entirely. He hadn't come back alone. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat in the warehouse with the laptop closed, the black box sealed again, and the cassette still spinning quietly in its converter, no longer playing, just turning like a clock without time. Outside, the wind stirred the trees like they were whispering secrets. Inside, the silence pressed in close, thick with the weight of everything her father had left behind. She had questions, 1,000 of them, but none louder than one. Why her? Why had he left this for her, not the government, not the army, not even Red, but her? By sunrise, she had her answer, because she was the only one who wouldn't try to exploit it. She was a mechanic, not a scientist or a soldier. She didn't see opportunity. She saw danger, responsibility. She understood that some engines aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some doors aren't meant to be opened twice. And maybe, just maybe, her father had known that the moment he sealed that vault and slid the key into a hidden letterbox meant only for her. Claire stood in front of the truck that morning, sunlight glinting off its battered hood, its wheels still half sunk into the concrete, and felt something shift in her. Not fear, not even resolve, just clarity. This wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about protecting. She returned to Red's metal shop later that day. When she told him what she'd seen, what the files had shown, he didn't speak for a long time, just looked out the window at the trees beyond the road, like he was watching for something. Finally, he said, "You're right. It has to stay buried." Claire nodded. "But not erased." He turned to her, eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" She looked down at her hands, still smudged with grease, still trembling slightly. "I'm going to restore the truck, but not to drive it, not to use it, to honor it, to remember what it held, what it means." Red's jaw worked quietly. Then he nodded once. "Then I'll help." Over the next week, they worked in silence. Red handled the frame reinforcement. Claire tore down the drivetrain, reassembled the parts carefully, respectfully, like she was piecing together not just a machine, but a story. She stripped the interior clean, replaced nothing, only preserved. Every wire, every bolt, was returned to its place, as if time itself needed to be reminded where everything once belonged. When they were done, they pushed the truck to the far end of the warehouse, beneath the skylight where the sun fell brightest in the afternoon. Claire placed the black box inside, still sealed, along with the flash drive, the cassette, the photo, and her father's note. Then she closed the rear doors and locked them. The warehouse wasn't empty anymore. It was a vault, again. But this time, it held not just danger, it held legacy. One her father had carried in silence. One she now carried in full awareness. She didn't feel alone anymore. She felt chosen. The truck sat quietly beneath the skylight, its olive paint now cleaned of grime, but not repainted, every dent and scuff left intact, like scars that told the truth. Claire stood in front of it one last time, arms folded, her coveralls streaked with oil and dust, boots rooted in the same concrete her father had once walked. She didn't cry. She thought maybe she would, but what filled her chest wasn't grief. It was something steadier, peace. The warehouse had become something else entirely. No longer an accident. No longer just a place she'd traded everything for. It was a monument now. Not to war. Not even to mystery, but to memory. She'd hung the photo of her father and his unit on the back wall, framed in wood salvaged from one of the old shipping crates. Below it, she placed a brass plaque. Operation Moth, in memory of what we chose not to unleash. No explanation, no footnotes. Just a truth quiet enough for those who were ready to feel it. She opened the warehouse doors that morning not to sell, not to display, but to invite. The first to arrive was Father Kent, who had heard whispers and walked 3 miles to see it for himself. He said nothing when he entered, just stood in front of the truck and bowed his head. Then came Leo, her former welding student, who asked if he could bring others. Veterans, historians, people who might understand. Claire agreed, but only under one condition: no photos, no social media, no exposure. This place wasn't for the world. It was for those still holding quiet questions. Weeks passed, then months. She installed lighting, a small bench near the back wall. Sometimes, when the sun fell through the skylight just right, it painted the truck in soft gold. Visitors would sit in silence and stare not at the machine, but at what it represented: stillness, respect, restraint. One evening, long after the last guest had gone, Claire stood alone in the bay. The sky outside was bruised purple, cicadas humming. She ran her hand along the hood one last time, the way her father used to, a kind of wordless communion. Then, without thinking, she said it aloud. "I understand now, Dad. Why you couldn't say it. Why you had to leave it for me." The warehouse creaked, softly, like it heard her. Claire stepped outside and pulled the doors closed. This time, she locked them not with fear but with trust. Behind those doors sat a story most people would never know, and that was exactly how it needed to stay. Some legacies aren't built for headlines. They're built for those willing to carry them with care, in silence, and with reverence. Claire Jensen walked away from that warehouse, not as a girl who'd traded everything, but as a woman who understood the cost of truth and the power of choosing not to wield it.